The UN Human Rights Council has adopted a resolution on promoting and protecting economic, social and cultural rights amid COVID-19 pandemic. The resolution was jointly submitted by South Africa, China, Bolivia, Egypt and Pakistan at the 49th session of the Human Rights Council on Friday.
The resolution is within the context of addressing inequalities in the recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic. They called for eliminating the gap of inequality when realizing people's economic, social and cultural rights amid the COVID-19 pandemic. China's permanent representative to the UN office in Geneva, Cheng Shu, introduced the draft resolution.
Now is the time to further promote economic, social and cultural rights for a better post-pandemic recovery. We call on the Human Rights Council to hear the call of all countries, especially developing and least developed countries, and to respond to the aspirations of people of all countries, especially vulnerable groups, by helping people to better enjoy economic, social and cultural rights and addressing inequalities.
The resolution stated that the pandemic has again highlighted the importance of strengthening the work on economic, social and cultural rights by multilateral human rights institutions.
Now, China's position in the world has changed significantly over the past 70 years, and in that time it's formed and enjoyed a number of relationships with countries across the continent. South Africa is one of them, often taking a position supporting Beijing in certain political matters that may sometimes even be at odds with the West. Most recently, China and South Africa have adopted a similar tone when it comes to the Russia-Ukraine conflict. And to unpack the China-South Africa relationship, I'm now joined by Gideon Chitanga, who's a research associate at the African Center for the Study of the United States at the University of the Witwatersrand here in Johannesburg. Gideon, thanks very much indeed for joining us. Good to have you on the program again. It's been a while.
Thank you.
All right, we've got quite a bit to unpack, the China-South Africa relationship, but let's start with Russia and China, because South Africa feeds into this through BRICS and other relationships. Russia and China together, they've been, even before the Ukraine war, have been cementing their relationship quite a bit. And I wonder, is this about their communist history, or is there much more to this story?
I think it is important to clarify that the conflict in Ukraine involves Russia and Ukraine, and China is not a part to the conflict or a direct player, but is an important member of the international community. And my understanding of China's position is that China would prefer the search of diplomatic and political solutions, the same position that South Africa has proposed in the General Assembly of the United Nations. So this is important to understand, because what we see is a conflict which is a military conflict. And I think that diplomacy is very important in this situation, because even those who are directly involved in the militarized conflict, they actually accepted that this conflict can only be ended through diplomacy. The second thing is China is committed to respecting the national sovereignty of other nations and their self-determination. And I think South Africa, from its history of the liberation struggle, I understand that the idea and sense of self-determination and national sovereignty is very important for these two countries, by the way, which are very important allies. So that they converge on a diplomatic solution is crucial, because this is the only alternative which is widely accepted as the final solution. The only difference is that the other parties have not accepted diplomacy as the pathway to end the conflict.
All right. I'm going to chat a little bit more about Ukraine, because that's what's topical at the moment. Yes, I hear what you're saying, but South Africa seems to have adopted something which is quite apart from a good number of countries, the West. When we look at the voting patterns, it looks as if South Africa has gone with China, has gone with Russia, regardless of the majority.
What I think is, yes, you might see it that way, but what is important to note is South Africa has its own unique diplomacy and unique historical experience in most conflicts, even in Africa. South Africa has been a major actor in mediation, in ending conflicts through diplomacy. And I understand that this is what they were seeking to offer to at the General Assembly. And I also believe that if you are going to offer mediation or to mediate in a conflict, it is important to take a position that is, although sensitive, but that requires you to get all the parties in the conflict to respect you. I take it that the same position is what China has taken. These countries are not directly parties to the conflict, but they still have an important voice, a voice that is that emerges from their position in the community of the world of countries, and they stick together in offering diplomatic solutions as opposed to military solutions. They also stick together in respecting the national sovereignty and self-determination of other nations as opposed to violating these principles. So I think this is where the convergence is. But also, China and South Africa are increasingly important allies and partners in various ways, and they collaborate in multiple multilateral platforms. The BRICS you mentioned, the BRI as well, they tend to vote together on critical matters that concerns the South bloc of nations. So there is an interest to harmonize their political and diplomatic positions in protecting the interests of developing countries or South countries, if you like.
All right, let's talk a little bit about this relationship between China and South Africa and the Communist Party and the ANC. I mean, these are two of the oldest parties in the world, actually. So tell us a little bit more about this relationship over time and how it's playing out in the modern day, particularly when it comes to world politics.
Yes, this is an important relationship that historically emerged from solidarity shared between China and the liberation movements in Southern Africa, including the Pan-Africanist Congress and the ANC. After South Africa became a democracy, in 1998, China and South Africa formally confirmed their diplomatic relations. It is interesting that China is one of the major countries that has supported the liberation struggles in South Africa and other countries in Southern Africa and in Africa. And the difficulties of fighting and defending against colonialism, I think, makes China a comradely and a very important historical ally with South Africa, but also with other liberation party governments. There is a level of high trust when it comes to dealing with China at a political level, because this is one major global player that has never strayed from its principles in terms of sharing solidarity against colonialism and standing with people who were oppressed, while the other nations, particularly the West, was aligning with the oppressors at that time. And this relationship is evolving when you look at South Africa and China at multiple levels, getting closer in form of trade ties, in form of diplomatic ties, in form of people-to-people exchanges. South Africa is a major trading partner for China, is the highest level of diplomatic relations. The two countries enjoy about 1.67 billion of US dollars in trade. The volume of trade between these two countries is 20% of the volume of the trade between Africa and China. Then if you look at that, you actually see that the relations are growing. President Xi Jinping has actually emphasized the need to strengthen these relationships, as much as President Ramaphosa has also committed himself to strengthening the relations. The two countries are in BRICS together. They collaborate under the Forum on China-Africa Relations. They collaborate in the BRI. They collaborate in international platforms where matters of defending the interests of southern nations, or what we can call developing nations, are concerned. So the relationships are solid, well-rooted, and well-grounded in the historical experiences, shared historical experiences of the people of China and people of South Africa. And more importantly, we see this relationship playing out in addressing contemporary problems like COVID. China has committed itself to partnering with South Africa and other African countries in producing COVID vaccines. It is probably the most significant, most important player that has supported all African countries which it has relations with in terms of donating a massive equipment to address the COVID pandemic. It is sharing its own experience in terms of mitigating day-to-day challenges of COVID. So if you consider all these benefits from the historical relations and the activity in addressing contemporary challenges, you see a solidifying relationship that is benefiting both countries, the peoples of South Africa and China and Africa, and the relationship is growing in leaps and bounds.
All right, you've mentioned Africa in general, which is interesting because, again, you know, when it comes to issues on the global stage, sometimes we see African countries voting with China or supporting China's position on certain issues. Tell us about the relationship China has with the continent. Is it one of genuine kind of I don't want to say that Africans are coerced, but are they free to differ with China?
I think so. I think that and the point is not about whether these countries are free to differ with China or not. I think the point is that China is one, if not the major investor in Africa in the past decade. It has partnered several African governments in infrastructure development, tangible infrastructure development. And you can see the benefits from this infrastructure development directly going into communities in terms of improving roads, building bridges, which are critical in the industrialization of African countries. So yes, African countries and China's policy is non-interference into the internal affairs of other countries, respecting their self-determination and their sovereignty. So yes, these countries can differ, but as diplomatic players, I think what African countries are doing is to embrace the relationship and explore opportunities to develop such a relationship because they can see the material benefits. This is not to say that there may not be contradictions within relations. I think what is important to take is African countries embrace China because they see the benefits and they work out if there are contradictions with their Chinese partner internally, exploring mutual benefit, which is the key point. I understand in President Xi's conversation with President Xi Jinping's conversation with President Ramaphosa this past weeks, he emphasized the need for both, for example, South Africa and China to benefit from their relationships. And I think this is going to be a major thing in more development of diplomatic relations between China and African countries, exploring mutual benefits, mutual development, whether it's trade and other areas of common and mutual interest.
All right, perhaps we can end where we started because the Ukraine conflict is the biggest issue in the world at the moment in terms of news. And I just wonder if China and South Africa are hitting the right tone with regards to the conflict in Ukraine, because people are dying and they're dying in their numbers, and unless Russia is helped to move quickly to end this conflict, more people will die. Do you think South Africa and China together, perhaps, being BRICS members, can play a role in ending this conflict?
Certainly they can play a role, and certainly they are playing their role. Unfortunately, the diplomatic route does not seem to be the most popular route with other parties at the present moment. But I think that this is the route that China and South Africa should continue to push and embrace on both Russia and Ukraine as a method to exit the conflict. After all, this conflict will be ended diplomatically.
Gideon Chitanga, thanks very, very much indeed for joining us and sharing your thoughts about this relationship between South Africa and China and how it deals with a lot of the world issues. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
All right, that's Gideon Chitanga joining us, talking to him about China and South Africa, and their relationship has come to the fore a number of times, especially when it comes to global issues, and more recently, Ukraine. All right, let's move on to other issues, and we come back to the continent and the United Nations.